is Motorsport Radio.
Калинка моя, в саду ягода, малинка, малинка.
Well, welcome back to the F1 Talk Show here on Motorsport Radio, once again live on camera, and I've got a working camera as well this time, which is even nicer. And if you couldn't tell from the beautiful intro, we are of course doing our Russian Grand Prix review, and I'm pretty certain it's safe to say that was the best Russian Grand Prix we have ever had, one of the best Grand Prix we've had this year. A brilliant start, a fantastic middle section with the will they won't they on strategy, plus the rain at the end. Oh my lord. My name is Ross McIntyre. Joining me tonight is the one and only Connor Jackson. How are we doing, Connor?
I am doing very well, Ross. Thank you very much for letting me join you once again on this show. Well, as you say, what a fantastic race. I don't know, maybe it didn't hold up to the 1913 Russian Grand Prix. I'll never know. But, as you say, best one of the current era, let's say that. And yeah, fantastic to get a win for a certain somebody that I'm sure Josh is very happy about.
Well, I'm sure it's a bittersweet result for the one and only Josh Harrison, because while, yes, his number one favourite took his 100th Grand Prix win, we saw someone else get their maiden win snatched away. But Josh, welcome along anyways, mate.
Yes, thank you for having me. And all I can say, Ross, is good luck, because trying to sum up that in an hour is going to be quite some achievement.
It's going to be a compact show, I'll say that much. It's right, you've got your Ibiza shirt on to help us party through and push onwards. You will just kick it off right at the business end. Lando Norris. Oh, Lando. Where do you even begin? Absolutely superb all weekend long, was super quick across the practice, took a fantastic pole position in the changing conditions on Saturday, with a then very mature drive across the Sunday. Did get jumped to the start by Carlos Sainz, but retook that lead back very well. Was absorbing the pressure from Lewis Hamilton very well across the middle portion of the race. And then at the end, the rain came down and McLaren decided, well, they kind of got their hand forced into not boxing. And then the rain really came down. And, well, that was the end of Lando's lead with about 3 laps to go, within touching distance of a maiden Grand Prix victory. And Connor, you know, what a victory it would have been as well. But, you know, surely that is him staking his claim as a driver to, you know, be touting big things in the future from.
Indeed, Norris will be determined to come back from this. One of the things, again, it's another Connor prediction, this one, that I almost got right. I said right at the start of the season, we were talking about, you know, who's going to win races this year. And I said, well, as I think we both agree that, you know, Hamilton and Verstappen were going to win the majority of them, but, you know, who else would pick up a victory? And I said, you know, there's going to be like 1 or 2 midfield victories this year that we don't expect. And I mentioned that Norris would be one of those midfield victories. And boy, was I so close to getting it right. But no, was not to be. But Norris, I said, performed very well all weekend, but again, it's a level of maturity. I think I'm sure you can talk about it, Ross, but that decision at the end for him not to come in, and the thing is, I didn't see the race live, as some of you might be aware. I was off working with Motorsport Media at the weekend, but I managed to sit down and see the Channel 4 highlights afterwards, and but I went into it completely blind. I managed to stay off social media all day. Amazingly, I know who could last more than 3 hours, and I managed to watch the race without knowing the result, and it came to those final few laps, and I saw the rain coming, and I thought, oh God, is it like a Spa 2011 situation where nobody dared come into the pit lane for the final 2 laps because the rain wasn't that heavy. Maybe they could get away with it. And I remember Nick Heidfeld gaining like 5 places on the final lap because he was the only one that bothered to come in for intermediate tyres. Well, we had a similar situation here, but the rain came down harder, and I didn't expect the rain to come down harder, which is why when Norris said no so defiantly to his team about coming in for winters, I thought, yes, please, that's got to be the decision. Like, you looked at the rain at the time and you thought, just tiptoe around that section. You're not going to lose 25 seconds to Hamilton, who's obviously had to come into the pit lane for a new set of tyres over the the next 4 laps. Surely you can't lose 25 seconds in 4 laps, let alone however far back it was to Carlos Sainz in third type thing. But yeah, honestly, I did not expect the rain to come down as heavy as it did, and yeah, I was humbled. So humbled at the end there when Norris did that. I know there's a whole checking social media immediately after knowing the result. There was a big thing about, was it the team's fault? But no. As I said, the live reaction there was Norris made the decision. He knew what he was doing. Because he had made the decision the day before in qualifying to go on to select tyres early, he's had that confidence boost so early in that weekend. He thought he was on top. The mentality in his brain is, I need to control the situation, and I have proven that I can control the situation this weekend. And maybe the team could have been a little bit harsher on him, or just be like, look, it's severely coming, Norris. We're changing for inters, no question. But the option was given, do you want to do that decision? And he made it. And I'm honestly pleased that he did make that decision, because if nothing else, it proves that he has developed as a driver. 1 or 2 years ago when he made his debut, he would have been the driver going, tell me guys, what should I do? What do I need to do in this situation? He didn't. He was the one making the calls, and ultimately down the line that is going to be vital. He didn't have the knowledge to get it right today or on Sunday even, but the fact he is a lot more confident with his ability behind the wheel and in controlling the situation with him and the team shows that he can be a team leader in the years to come. This was, again, a learning weekend in which I'm sure he'll be bitterly disappointed, but he holds his head high, as his Instagram post says, and I'm sure he will come back at this fighting, especially if we have another wet race in Turkey like we did last year. So I guess we'll see.
It'll be interesting to have another wet race in Turkey. Hopefully they sort out their tarmac issues. That does bring me something that I actually personally do want to touch on briefly. The whole Norris pit incident, I think is what we'll refer to it as. Of course, Norris basically led the entire race until the last few laps. They made the decision to stay out and the rain got heavier. That's just somehow how it happens. Obviously heart-crushing for him. A lot of people, I think, were very, very quick to criticise McLaren and Norris for the decision, saying, all you needed to do was box and, you could have won the race. You made a Grand Prix with Lando, 2 wins in a row for McLaren. There was a lot of, online hate. F1 social media is something I always need to have a discussion with anyway. I always mean to, because I feel like it needs to get put in its place by our expert panel here who know exactly what they're talking about, mainly because it's dreadful. But one thing I think it's important to know is, A, what Connor said, it's a good learning experience for both Norris and their team, and B, we know absolutely nothing about what was going on. We will have heard about 1% of the radio conversation, and that would have been between Norris and his engineer. We would not heard the conversation between engineer and strategist and team principal, Andreas Seidel, and Seidel and the engineer. We are not allowed to hear those. Well, we are, but it's kind of generally considered among the team's common courtesy that the FIA don't broadcast those messages. We saw a while back the FIA started trialling broadcasting messages between team principals and the Michael Massey at the FIA, and that went down like a lead balloon with all the teams. So they kind of quietly pushed that under the rug a little bit. So when you consider that we have heard basically nothing about the incident in a whole, it puts it in a very different light, because obviously Norris's opinion is, vital. He's the one actually doing the driving. He's the one who really should get the final call on what tyres they're on. But, you've got the guys looking, at the rain. You're talking to Seidel, what do we do? And ultimately they got forced into not boxing because they left it too late, and they thought they could leave it too late. Mercedes, in this scenario, held all the cards anyway. Because what would have happened is Hamilton would have been told box opposite Norris. So if Norris had come in, Hamilton would have stayed out. And if that had happened, then Norris might have won the race. You never know. But that's what didn't happen. That's just alternate history. You got to cope with that, I suppose. But Hamilton would have been told box opposite Norris. That would have been the instruction to Lewis Hamilton. Because Mercedes held all the cards in that situation. Because if Mercedes had boxed and then the rain hadn't come down, they'd have still finished second. If McLaren had boxed Norris, he'd come out, rain hadn't come down, and Hamilton hadn't boxed, they've just lost the win. So it was a tough call to make, and Mercedes in that scenario held all the cards. I mean, you bear in mind Mercedes have been in that scenario multiple times before in regards to getting late in the race with big strategy calls. They've been there before. They've been the team at the top since 2014. McLaren haven't won, until Monza, hadn't won a race since Brazil 2012 with Jenson Button. And it's a relatively new dynamic at the team. Seidel, Zach Brown, these guys are all guys they've brought in across the last few seasons. Very, experienced guys. Seidel ran the Porsche LMP1 program for God knows how many years, but they're not, random people they've just brought off the street. They know what they're doing, but they still haven't been in that F1 context before. So it kind of all goes out the window. The plan works until it all kicks off, as the famous saying, or something like that anyway. So when you consider that, no one was sure about the weather, when you consider that Norris did have that confidence boost and again, wasn't sure on the weather at the time he made the call to stay out. Yes, intermediates were faster, but he thought that the rain was going to stay at that level. He thought he could make it to the end. It was only really when Hamilton boxed when it really started to come down. And when Hamilton boxed, it was actually quite evident that Inters was the right way to go. But by that point, it was too late. If they came in, they'd have sacrificed the lead. And then again, was it a mistake to not come in then? Yeah, probably. But, think about yourself in that scenario. Even if you played, I don't know, like motorsport manager or football manager at home or something, and you get this dramatic scenario at home, your instant reaction is to panic and go, oh, don't touch it. Similar thing here, a motorsport manager, late in the race, you try and eke it out towards the end. And unfortunately, the rain came down hard in the second sector, and that was that for Lando. So it's a tough scenario, but I feel at the same time that we all need to back off a little bit. There's been a lot of hostility towards Lando, mainly towards McLaren. Actually, I find, which I think is completely unjust, completely unfair. When you consider the situation they're in, the fact they've never been in this situation before, the fact that Lando had never been in this situation before either. Their confidence was high coming from Monza. Their confidence was high coming from Sunday when he took a superb pole position. And he'd led majority of the race. So it's, it was a mistake. That they made a call and it didn't work out. That is by definition a mistake. But it wasn't, oh my goodness me, we should have done the opposite here. They got forced into it. Mercedes just had the upper hand in that scenario because of where they were on track and the fact they had that experience. Lewis Hamilton's been in that situation before. And, Norris, to be fair to him, had been absorbing Hamilton's pressure all race long, which was fantastic. We'll get into Hamilton in a minute. I'll let Josh do his bit. But it was Mercedes. They had all the cards. They had all the cards against their chest. And McLaren were just throwing darts in the wall. What are the Mercedes going to do? How do we react to that? To be fair, all race long, it was a fantastic strategic battle. You had the action of the early portion of the race. And then, the middle kind of 30, 40 laps was just brilliant because at first it looked like the two-stop was going to be the one to be on. So you had, the Ferraris could be very competitive here. Then very quickly it turned around and the one stop was actually the real one to be on. And then it was Hamilton versus Norris. Are they going to box towards the end of the race? Who does what? It was brilliant. And then at the end, it all came to a head with the rain. So it was a fantastic race, and obviously, real heart in your mouth moment, real sporting drama. I was watching, I was sitting there, and every few corners I was going, hang on, no, this person's going to win. No, this person's going to hang on. If this person stops now, this person's going to win, because there was so much going on. But yeah, in conclusion, after my little rant, don't go too hard on McLaren and Norris, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, they made an error of judgment. And they paid the price for that. But at the end of the day, they were definitely on the lower step in that scenario in comparison to Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. They did what they thought was right. And in the end, unfortunately, the racing gods disagreed. The racing gods giveth, the racing gods taketh away. And in this scenario, they decided to make it rain quite hard in the second sector. And that was that, unfortunately. Obviously, heartbreaking for Norris, heartbreaking for McLaren, heartbreaking for many a fan around the world, I'm sure. But that's racing. It is the most emotionally draining sport in the world. It brings you sheer elation and it destroys your soul at the same time. And I'm sure that McLaren, Norris, they're a very hard-working team. He's a very hard-working kid. They're going to be coming back in Turkey, looking to, make a point, pick up on some lost ground, and looking to, get another strong result, whether that be winning, whether that be, coming home in the points. It doesn't matter. They'll just be looking to make a point that, that wasn't just a fluke scenario. They were there on merit. And yeah, they messed up at the end, but they're not going to let that happen again. Now, because of Norris's mistake, we saw a certain someone winning their 100th Grand Prix. And before we get into this, actually, Josh sent me some stats earlier, which I'm just going to read out quickly, which I thought were quite interesting. So we got a little quiz for you. So just a quiz for the panel, quiz for anybody watching as well. If you can tell us the top 3 drivers with the highest win percentage at the end of the show, you can get a pat on the back. I don't know. But yeah, and also another stat, that was the first McLaren pole in 8 years, which is the biggest gap. Of all time, yeah. So since 1950.
Okay, good.
In Formula One, not just Grand Prix, in Formula One. Yeah, that is McLaren's first pole in 8 years, which is the biggest gap between poles for a team, ever. Williams haven't had a pole since 2012, so it doesn't count because they haven't had another pole since. It was the biggest gap between pole to pole. Biggest winning margin as well, apparently, since the 2008 British Grand Prix, which is interesting, apparently. And Max Verstappen, we'll touch on him later, P20 to P2, 18 positions gained in one race, which is Connor's already got it right. He's just messaged me. Well done, Connor, you got it bang on, mate. We'll reveal those stats at the end with the win percentages, which is the most positions gained in a race across 2 years.
It's almost like I know this stuff.
Yeah, that's true. You are a bit of a stat man. Anyway, though, yeah, a certain someone by the name of Sir Lewis Hamilton took his 100th Grand Prix victory, the first driver in the history of motorsport to win 100 Grand Prix. Now, Josh, obviously that's a stat to behold. However, you may think differently, but in my opinion, that was actually quite a poor weekend for Lewis, I thought. When you consider very, very silly mistake in qualifying, then I think Mercedes didn't get the pressures right on the slicks, which is why neither him nor Bottas performed in that kind of last few minutes of qualifying. I just think Mercedes made a mistake there. Then he got a poor start. Again, I can understand that. The right side of the grid was still damp, so it was likely that he just got a poor getaway because of that. Then he just got stuck in the dirty air, didn't really do anything, and then kind of sat behind Norris, was putting pressure on but wasn't able to get past. And then, the rain happened, and I guess the luck came into it there. So yeah, it's an 100th Grand Prix win, but isn't it a 100th Grand Prix win to be proud of?
No. I think the Hamilton's race at Sochi was one that you could only describe that a champion gets, where everything, where it matters, the champion gets the right decisions, comes in at the right time. But he shouldn't have won that. Norris, I think Norris can leave, and he would probably need a wheelbarrow for 2 certain things above his legs for driving a Formula One car on what can only be described as a full wet track on slicks and not completely bin it and still finish a race. I think Norris needs a proper pat in the back. And I think if you saw at the end of the race, Hamilton patted Norris on the back because Hamilton knew Norris had him beat big time. Hamilton was never going to beat Norris. It's showing that the Mercedes is at the end of its era. It's showing that the Mercedes is at the end of its development, and it is showing that whereas certain teams have developed and got faster and faster, I believe the Mercedes started off here and has stayed here throughout the hybrid era, and as the other teams have caught up. And I think that's become more evident. You look at Bottas. I mean, for one thing, right, Valtteri Bottas is obviously not driving for Mercedes anymore, which is a huge, huge worry for Mercedes, because Bottas practically drove into the barrier to give Verstappen enough space to let him past. He didn't defend at all, right? I have seen better defences with a paper wall against a flamethrower than Valtteri Bottas against Verstappen. It was like he saw Verstappen in the mirror, wet himself with fear, and then thought, "Oh, I'm not going to get involved in this championship fight. I'm going to let him pass." So Valtteri Bottas, he's either a really bad team driver or has just given up with the team. One of those, but either one, it don't make him look good. At the front, I said, Hamilton, in qualifying, I think it was a mixture of cold tyres on a slightly damp pit lane, and he just lost control. The Mercedes throughout the season has had moments where the car has just lost control. And, as you saw there, he turned in like a normal, not completely normal in the pit lane, and the car just almost swapped ends. And this is what Mercedes have been battling with the whole way through the season. It hasn't been dealt with. And, it's showing another vulnerability with Mercedes. He started, obviously, in the low grid spot. So you immediately knew that going down into the first corner, that Hamilton would either get a specific space that would get him through into the lead, or he would be bunched up. And
to be fair to Norris as well in this scenario, Norris judged that perfectly with that defence on Hamilton.
Oh, Norris, it was absolutely, hats off to Norris. It was like he was driving, I haven't got a single thing that I can complain about with Lando Norris in that race. Not one thing. And that is a surprise, because there's a lot of people that I can complain about for years, right? And I can complain about Lewis Hamilton because
Can you?
Yeah, he didn't. When he was driving, there was something about him that just sort of said, "I'm all right." He was driving the championship race rather than the race to win. So he was sitting back and just letting everything happen. And I would presume he was getting updates from the Mercedes engineer where Verstappen was, right? And all this. And then obviously he stayed out longer and longer as the rain came down and the track got wetter and wetter, and they were really struggling. And then Norris stayed out and Hamilton came in. And I think that was purely because they knew that they can't beat the McLaren. So they were like, it's raining, it's wet. We can't win second. We can't win the race. But if we put on intermediates, we won't crash. I think that was Mercedes' belief. I don't think they thought that pit stop would win them the race. I think they thought that pit stop would secure them second. Because of how badly handling the car has been through the season, if you add a bit of rain into the mix, there is a very good chance, as we saw in qualifying on Saturday, Hamilton could and probably would have binned it if he was in Norris's situation. I think Hamilton would have crashed out if he had been in Norris's situation and stayed out on slicks. So I'm not convinced Hamilton is... it's really weird. I can't work out whether Lewis Hamilton is not as good a driver as he has been in previous years, or whether the car is just an absolute dog and he's driving brilliantly. See, I don't know whether the car is at the standard Bottas is doing, so 4th, 5th, 4th places, that sort of area, and Hamilton is just driving it out of his skin to get to where he is, or whether it's the car is where Hamilton is and Hamilton isn't driving out of his skin. Hamilton's driving within the car. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, that Russia race was Lando Norris's to lose. And unfortunately, as it says in the famous song Africa by Toto, I bless the rain down in Africa, except from this time it's in Russia.
Well, fair enough. You can just see some. Sorry for cutting across you here quickly, Josh. You can just see some tweets coming up on the screen of some of the celebrations from the internet of Hamilton's 100th win. And I'm surprised you've taken this angle. You're usually Hamilton's biggest favourite fan. And you're actually, giving him a bit of a slagging off this time around, which is, fair enough. I'm glad you're doing it. Shake it up a bit. But yeah, fair enough. Please continue.
in Hamilton's history, you look through Hamilton's 100 races, right? He has won far harder races than that, far easier. Think back to the first championship in Brazil. He was driving in almost awful conditions, and he had to pass, I think it was 5 cars on the final lap around Interlagos, which is not an easy track to overtake. And yet he did it. You know, you think back to China, is it China 2010, when it was absolutely pouring down the rain, cars going off everywhere, and yet Hamilton stayed on the track easily. Yet in Russia, he seemed to be, I mean, I don't even think he got the fastest lap in that race. I don't know who got the fastest lap, actually. I wasn't really paying attention to that bit. I don't think anyone was, really. But it
was Norris, I think, wasn't it?
It was Norris.
Thank you.
So it was. I don't know what was. It wasn't a Hamilton that we've come to expect, which was quite scary. Bearing in mind that Hamilton can't afford to have bad performances, and I know I'm saying a win is a bad performance, but why was it so hard why did it take Norris to crash out for Hamilton to win? You know, Verstappen came from the back of the grid to second. You know, so why was Hamilton not 25 seconds ahead at that point? Why was Hamilton not lapping Verstappen? You know, going off, you know, why was Hamilton not on pole? I think they got the setup wrong in Sochi from the very start. I think from the very first practice, they had that setup completely wrong. And I have a feeling they had a wet setup on their car, which meant that they, even though they had the low downforce rear wing, I think the rest of the car was set up for the wet race, which means that they had probably no performance. They had the tyre durability because that's the wet setup. The wet setup is for the tyres to last a long while, but they had no straight line performance. They probably, I don't think they had much cornering speed. And I think because of that, their wet setup that they had, I think that's what made their race an absolute dog.
I think saying they had a wet setup is a little bit far, but I do see your point. I absolutely see your point there, Josh, because you remember when we were going into this weekend, there was all talks about, you know, qualifying being delayed, you know, none of the sessions would get going. There was
Don't forget practice 3 was abandoned, wasn't it?
Of course, practice 3 was abandoned. You know, there was big, you know, talks about, you know, is this another Belgium situation, basically, which, you know, we none of us wanted. So the fact we basically ended up starting the race in, you know, relatively dry conditions, as it were, you know, compared to what it could have been, I think caught a lot of the teams out, because very early on in the weekend they were just expecting full wet start to finish on that race, but obviously was not the case. Mercedes, as you say, really did take advantage of what was looking to be a bad weekend for them, but what's I think interesting is just how quickly Hamilton could catch up when he wasn't in dirty air. Now, if you look at Hamilton's performance during the race, you're right, he got boxed in at the start, which lost him a couple of places. He dropped behind Ricciardo and Stroll and those lot. And Ricciardo was the notable one because Hamilton never passed Ricciardo in that opening stint. The drivers ahead of him would eventually pit, you know, as I said, Stroll, Sainz and all the rest would eventually, you know, make their pit stops early in the attempt to do a 2-stop race, especially with Carlos Sainz. And so it just ended up being a case of we had one point where Norris was leading by a good, I forget what it was, but it was like 25 seconds over Daniel Ricciardo in second and then Hamilton in third. But Hamilton had been sort of stuck behind that McLaren since basically the first lap. He hadn't, you know, pushed forward, overtaken. He was really struggling in the dirty air. And we saw that again later on, because the moment Ricciardo pitted, ironically, he pitted because Mercedes played the Joker pit stop, basically. And they're all coming into the pit lane, quick Ricciardo pit, and then everyone goes back into the garage. So the moment Hamilton was released, he actually caught up with Norris quite, you know, successfully. If you look at the gap between, you know, him and Norris at that pit stop point, and then the gap between the two of them by the time both drivers had actually cycled through their first pit stop, there wasn't a lot of gap between the pair. And Hamilton did, again, close that gap up because in free air, Hamilton and the Mercedes was a quick car. And as a result, we saw the points with 10 laps to go or whatever, that Hamilton was on Norris's tail. And of course, at that point, you're all thinking, oh, well, here we go. Here comes Lewis storming through the field, second half of the race. He's preserved his tyres. He knows what he's doing. Masterful Lewis. And then he can't get past Norris because, again, the car, at least in Russia, was really struggling to follow anyone else, especially the McLarens. And, we'd already proven that with Ricciardo, which is why I think McLaren weren't panicking Norris too much, as it were, because they'd already proven with Ricciardo that Lewis could easily be held up by these the Brackley team, because they had the Mercedes engines. They were equally competitive along the straight. The cars had very similar cornering performance, which is surprising. And it was just Lewis Hamilton driving that Mercedes on in free air that was making up the time. But the moment you get stuck behind Norris, the turbulence is too much, which is why, again, another reason I think Norris was, again, very determined to not make that pit stop, which is, well, if I pit and he also pits and we screw up and he comes out, Norris comes out behind Hamilton in the pit stop or whatever, then there's no way he's going to be able to re-overtake Hamilton, even on intermediate tyres, because track position was very vital in that situation. But the other point is stretching out gaps between drivers. The big thing we've seen this season is how fast Verstappen and Hamilton are when just given a racetrack to go race. I talked about Hamilton being quick in free air, but think about the amount of races this season where we've just seen Hamilton and Verstappen build up a 30-second gap to anyone else in the field, and so the entire sort of grid is spaced out even before the first round of pit stops. But look how close everyone was at the Russian Grand Prix, not even during the wet part of the race, but the dry middle part of the race. Norris was extending his lead, and he was the only real example of someone with a notable gap, but even his wasn't Lewis Hamilton levels of gap that we've seen from previous Grand Prix this year. The field was very bunched up, which made pit stopping very difficult because there was no gaps for anyone to come back into. We saw how Russell lost a load of time in his first pit stop because he just couldn't find the free air, and when he did eventually come back out, he was sort of stuck behind traffic or whatever, and ultimately lost a lot of time. He also didn't switch on the tyres that well, and again, that lost him more track position. And because we didn't have that spread out field, as it were, you don't have those gaps to properly put in the pit stop strategies that the engineers expect from Grand Prix like this. If it had been Hamilton pole, Bottas second, and Verstappen right at the back, it would have been a highly uninteresting race. Hamilton would have zoomed off into the distance, made sure he had a gap over anyone else, and the real question would have been a case of would Verstappen be able to drive his way back up to P3? In the end, we had Hamilton 1, Verstappen 2, which is ironically the only time this season we didn't expect that result, because Verstappen was able to catch in the early stages, but again, he got caught up behind that whole train of cars and struggled to make progress in the middle part of the race. We even saw Alonso overtake him after Verstappen's pit stop, which I think was a real scare for the Red Bull team, because they were very much concerned that damn, Alonso's overtaking us and he was on with Verstappen on new tyres. What's this all about? The rain was a godsend for Max Verstappen, and he was so lucky to get away with that, because otherwise he would have just been on for a 6th place finish or whatever. But I will say the biggest congratulations of the weekend goes to Valtteri Bottas's engineer, who back on whatever it was, lap 20 or whatever, predicted that Bottas could climb up to P5 by the end of the race. And where did he finish? 5th place. So, congratulations to the engineer for Bottas there. Clearly he knows something we don't.
He's got that voodoo magic. Yeah, go on, Josh.
Can I just say there was two things about that race that worried me for Lewis Hamilton, right? One, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mercedes hasn't been able to overtake the McLaren on race pace, right? Since as far as I can remember, before Spa, when McLaren did that massive update, okay, which is one worrying thing, because we've got a number of races now where, if that's the case, Hamilton could very easily be stuck behind the McLaren all race. Okay, because like you saw there, he couldn't pass Ricciardo, he then couldn't pass Norris. I think
we saw the same in the Italian Grand Prix as well when Ricciardo won that race.
Exactly, in the sprint race. In the sprint race, he was stuck behind the McLarens all race long, because I don't think the Mercedes is as fast as the McLaren. I think an update has happened to the McLaren, which has actually made them faster than the Mercedes, which is quite a scary thing when you think about it. You know, second thing that worried me, right, is Verstappen has taken his engine penalty. So Verstappen is on engine number 4, Hamilton is on engine number 3, which means one of the races coming up, Hamilton will have to take the 4th engine.
Unless he can make this third one last to the end.
Which is not going to happen, right?
It's unlikely.
It's, you know, it's not going to happen. I think the engine he's on at the moment already done for 4 races. You know, so you're asking an engine to do 12 races. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So he's going to have to take a back of the grid penalty. And we know how bad the Mercedes is at following cars and how hard it is to overtake, which means that there's going to be a race which Verstappen could very easily win and Hamilton could very easily finish out of the points. When I saw the Mercedes Hamilton's qualifying result, I was going, McLaren, just take the engine penalty. Just put a new engine in Hamilton's car, start him, because where Hamilton would have qualified, the penalty would have put him in 19th place, which would have put him ahead of Max Verstappen at the back of the grid. Penalty taken, he'd have been level with Verstappen, he'd have been ahead of Verstappen with a brand new engine, right? Which means that would have made it to the end of the season, no more engine penalties, you know. But it didn't. So I was like, okay, so Hamilton has to win and Verstappen will have to finish out of the points to make the not taking engine penalty worthwhile. This hasn't happened.
Fair, I think that's what Mercedes were intending. I think the plan was the plan was to pick up where Verstappen can't, get a win and get some momentum. So when they do take the engine penalty, they're safe to take it, and Verstappen can't catch them on points. Obviously, Verstappen put in a fantastic role. I'll get to that in a minute. So I think their plans went out the window a little bit, but they're now leading the drivers by 2 points, which isn't exactly much. But they are now leading the drivers once again. Again, I think their plan just went out the window, but their plan was just to capitalise and get a big haul of points and build a gap to Verstappen, use that to move forward, and then have such a gap that if they do need to take another engine before the end of the season, they wouldn't be a risk of Verstappen. However, that being said, I think it would have been brilliant if he had taken an engine, because I would have loved to have seen Verstappen versus Hamilton coming through the pack. I think that, because obviously we've seen...
Yeah, it seems that Ross's mic's gone, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like, but if you look at the calendar on the races left, right, you look at where Hamilton could take the engine penalty. There's not a circuit which you'd go, that is massively beneficial to Mercedes. It's not like Monza, or anything like that. You've got Turkey, you've got America. And then you've got the Saudi Arabia and Yas Marina circuits as well, right? There's a lot of circuits in there where Red Bull could quite easily dominate. And that's excluding the fact that Red Bull are on a brand new engine with 8 races to go. Mercedes will be, when they go to Turkey, will be on Lewis Hamilton's 3rd engine, and it would be, because of the damage in Monza, he'd had to put the 3rd engine was ruined, so he had to put the 2nd engine back in, which I think maintains. I think it will be on its 6th race in Turkey, right? So you're then looking at 14 races on one engine, bearing in mind the power drop as well. Mercedes are in a very bad situation right now.
I think, Josh, the engine penalty will probably come the race after Turkey at the United States race, COTA, because COTA is a circuit that has previously been beneficial to Mercedes. It's a very easy track to overtake on thanks to the big long straights and, the wide corners. So that's an opportunity there for them to take it. But you are right in the sense of, we're going to Mexico City, we're going to Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo especially has been, quite a good Red Bull circuit in recent years. And then we're up to, Losail in Qatar for that, that to be announced race that will probably happen in Qatar. Who knows who's going to do well. And then again, as you say, Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi to end the season. It's, I don't think, I certainly wouldn't say, Mercedes are out of it, or anything such that matter, because Perez hasn't exactly been stellar in the last couple of races, let's say that.
But Hamilton is in a bad situation in the Driver Championship because of this situation.
But Hamilton is definitely at a disadvantage, and one that I think he will want to capitalise on in Turkey. He obviously won the championship there last year, and it's a circuit he has a good history with. I think everyone remembers his drive through the field in GP2 in Turkey. So again, maybe we're going back to 2000 and 2006 here, in which maybe they'll put a new engine in for Turkey and just see if he can do another 2006 again and take the win from there. So,
but this isn't obviously. We need to consider that they could, go to Turkey, race around Turkey, fine, he wins it, good. Verstappen wins his third, fine. He goes to Mexico, Hamilton wins, Verstappen goes third. They then think, okay, we'll go one more race, and then at Losail, we'll bring in a new engine or whatever. He goes to Sao Paulo, or he goes, and suddenly he's starting on the grid, drives off, 3 laps into the race, the engine goes DNF. He then, then what do? So suddenly, Verstappen wins the race. Hamilton's not scoring. Next race, he's going to be starting on the back of the grid because of the engine penalty. That's 2 races that have been stuffed, basically, because not taking the engine penalty in Russia, which would still have given Hamilton a bit of an advantage.
Again, it's all hearsay, and to be honest, you look at the Russian Grand Prix result, he got the win. Whatever happens, it's still the best result for him at that place. But we're in an opposite 2016 situation, Josh. You might remember Nico Rosberg won the championship in 2016, and a lot of criticism was on that, Hamilton had 2 retirements to Rosberg's 1, and that was the whole reason that he won the championship. That engine blow up in Malaysia was the whole reason that he won the championship or whatever. But we're in an opposite situation this year. Hamilton's had 2 non-points finishes, I will say. 1 retirement in Italy and a non-point finish in Azerbaijan. While Verstappen has had a retirement in Azerbaijan, a retirement in the UK, and a retirement in Italy. He's had 3 non-point scoring finishes. Verstappen is, the guy in lieu, as it were. So we are looking at a sort of a situation where Verstappen could probably do sort of a Rosberg situation at this point and try and consolidate just the results he can, in the knowledge that Hamilton will have one bad race in the future, whether that be due to the engine penalty or just fate of the luck means he might get another DNF or whatever. But if we get to the end of the season and both of these drivers have scored in every race and Hamilton successfully recovers from his engine penalty in, we'll say, COTA, for example, as I mentioned, and he finishes 3rd in that race, we'll say for hearsay, Josh, then you go, well, if Hamilton wins the championship by 2 points or, a small amount of points or whatever, do you have an argument that Verstappen was the better driver, but he just had 1 more non-points finish?
Well, this is it, and this is why I think it was so surprising that Mercedes didn't take the engine penalty. purely, as I said, because surely the whole point is, right, Verstappen at the back of the grid, you think, that, I mean, surely Mercedes know they've got to take a fourth engine. Surely. Like, I'd be amazed if they think that engine will last, right? And or be competitive till the end of the race, to the end of the season. So you're thinking, right, Verstappen's got a brand new engine in Russia, a brand new engine. He's taken an engine penalty, back of the grid. He hasn't qualified. Hamilton's qualified in 4th. 15 places puts him in 19th position. I think it'd actually put him 2 places ahead of Verstappen at the start of the grid. Surely, but as I'm saying, surely that would have been better, because you would have then eliminated the advantage that Red Bull now has, while at the same time staying ahead of him and holding all the cards, than starting where Hamilton started, and knowing now that Hamilton only has a very slender championship lead. Hamilton knows, I'm sure more than anything else, right, that one of these races, if not 2, as I said, because the engine could go at any moment now because it's been old, it's been used for so many races. It's had the impact from Silverstone, for example. It's had the fast races and all this sort of stuff. So, potentially you could have 2 races now where Hamilton will guarantee having a difficult race. And this could have all been avoided by starting at, 19th position at Sochi, where, there's a good chance Hamilton could have still won it. Isn't that right, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, it's all up for debate. I know you've just asked a question. We're going to move us on because I feel like we've just drawn on this topic a little bit too long, and I have 2 more questions we're going to ask, and one I think is quite interesting. Today's quite a historic day. 31 years ago it's 31 years since Martin Donnelly's huge accident at Jerez, which is, something to celebrate and then die. Messi scored his first goal for PSG in the last 5 minutes, so you can say you were here for that when he stopped being a fraud. Obviously, when we're talking about history, 100 Grand Prix wins for Lewis Hamilton. So just a question, just spark a bit of debate. Not your favourite, may I just say, Josh, this isn't your favourite. What do you think was his best win? Go to you first. Actually, no, Connor's already reached for the microphone. Go on then, Connor.
I will keep this to a 1-paragraph answer. I actually didn't have an immediate answer to that, I'll be perfectly honest. However, I will say that some of his early wins will absolutely be noted. The dominant drive he had in Great Britain, I think it was 2008, where he won by basically over a minute, I think has to go down. It has one of, if not his greatest victory, because of just how special it proved Hamilton to be so early on in his career. So that one.
And Josh, you're going to respond, agree, disagree?
Yeah, that was one of them, the Silverstone one. That stands out for me because, if I'm right, the conditions were atrocious as well.
Awful rain.
Yeah, and Hamilton just basically was just like, this is a normal drive for me. Sunday drive, and else is going, this is, cancel it, I can't do it. Hamilton was like, oh, is it raining? That's what it looked like. It looked like Hamilton didn't even know. Like, it was just, yeah. But I mean, another one that stands out for me was his championship winning drive at Sao Paulo in 2008, where everything that could go wrong went wrong for Hamilton. That then could have meant that he should not have won the title. And yet, at the last possible moment, and I mean the last possible moment,
Are you talking about wins or just drives here, Ross?
Wins. In that case, then, I would say the Turkey last year, because yes, Hamilton's driven this track before and won this track before, but the conditions, the fact that there was no grip, the fact that none of the drivers were able to cope with the conditions, yet Hamilton was able to drive practically, almost from the back of the grid to the front on a track that, you shouldn't have even been driving on. It was dangerous. But he did it, and he did it really well. And he showed he still had car control from years and years. But as I said, there are just so many, and it's, 100 wins is a huge milestone. It's probably one that will not be equaled for a long while. I mean, you're probably looking another 10 seasons at least till someone could even get halfway, So it shows you just how good a driver he is. But at the same time, it shows how developed a driver he has become. You look through all of his race wins, every race win, it was something different. He had a challenge to overcome. He had conditions to overcome. He had a car issue to overcome. He had a crash to come out to survive and continue. Remember Silverstone? Was it 2019 when was it last year when all the tyres blew, and he had to cross the line on 3 wheels?
Yeah, last year. Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. He had to somehow manage to get across the line with a puncture.
Sorry, Josh.
Yeah, so, it'll either be Turkey last year or Silverstone last year, where, Turkey, he went across the line on ice, essentially, and then Silverstone, when he went across the line on a car that, he shouldn't have been moving. He was driving on 3 wheels, so, yeah. Those are my two. I can't decide which one though.
Right, I am fully ready for some criticism for these two, but I'm going to send the boat out. I've got 2, and you are very welcome to shout at me and throw me off my pedestal and abdicate me. I'm going to go Monza 2018 and Abu Dhabi 2014.
Abu Dhabi, I don't agree with. If I remember rightly, I don't remember Abu Dhabi being one of his finest drives in 2014.
No, it wasn't a great drive, and Rosberg had mechanical issues, so it was actually pretty easy. But I was going for the historical context of that one, because obviously it was the win that started, the Lewis Hamilton that we know today. I mean, that was his second world championship. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, he could go on and win 3 or 4 with the pace Mercedes have got, as I'm sitting here in a puddle of my own tears in 2021 as he's possibly on his way to his 8th. But yeah, for the historical context, I mean, if Rosberg had won the championship that year, to be fair, I think if Rosberg hadn't have had a gearbox failure at Singapore before the race, I think he would have won that championship. That's just my personal opinion. But
remind me of the Monza 2018 one again.
Monza 2018 was when he went toe-to-toe with Kimi Räikkönen, and I think it was just... I think, again, a bit of historical context to it, but I think it was just the fact that on Ferrari's home turf, and, Räikkönen...
That was a great race. I can picture it now.
Ferrari, for once, got their strategy bang on. By the way, Ferrari properly messed up their strategy in Sochi. I was going to make a point of that, but we're kind of out of time. But yeah, they messed up their strategy big time in Sochi, as per usual. But
so
Ferrari
did Williams to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least Russell came in early for the Inters, though.
Yeah, that's true. But but Ferrari got their strategy bang on that time at Monza. Raikkonen got the undercut on Hamilton, and they had a fantastic battle. And in the end, Hamilton was able to literally just force Raikkonen out the way and pushed his way through. And then obviously had that famous image of the Mercedes going 2 by 2 in tandem the whole way on the in lap after the race, just to kind of prove a point. We're on your home turf, and we're not afraid of you. We're going to keep winning, and it kind of rubbed it in the Tifosi's faces a bit. And I think just for the historical context, going toe to toe with Ferrari, ultimately Ferrari, I don't think were ever quite good enough for Mercedes in that 2017, 2018, especially 2017. They definitely weren't good enough. 2018, at one point, I think the car was better. By that point, it was Mercedes with a better team. But yeah, I think just for historical context, the way there was, showing that if it push comes to shove, they're not afraid to put up a fight. I think that was a big win for him.
The only thing I'd say about that Monza one was Hamilton, he didn't have to do anything challenging. He basically just drove the way that he's been driving.
He did have to do
stuff to overtake the Ferraris.
Yeah, but
Raikkonen was defending for his life for like 10 laps and he was pushing like.
But he's used to that. It was, you know what I mean? It wasn't. I'm not saying it wasn't one of his best. I'm just saying it was. It was a fairly normal race for him to have to, you know, battle with someone and pass, which is, you know, is what is the best racer on the grid. You know.
Yes, he's really amazing at passing around Monza, including coming out of the pit lane.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Don't try to light up like the fuse because it will explode. But like with me, I think towards his races where he has had to basically do the impossible. Turkey, he had to do the impossible, which was pass half the grid in a car that wasn't suited to the track, on a car that wasn't set up for the conditions, and yet he did it. You know, so it's that sort of thing. In Silverstone, he had to basically drive 2 laps around Silverstone, right, on tyres that he knew will not last till the end of the race, and yet he had to try and make them last. He did something that everyone thought, no chance. He's going to crash. It's going to go out. The tyres are going to blow. It's going to go. The tyres blew, and you're thinking, how is he still going? And he's just continued to go. He willed the car. He used his skill to get that car across the line. So that's where I would say, I think, but there's hundreds, well, there's not hundreds, but there's tens of races where Hamilton, you know, so you could say this is his best win. But yeah, I think there's loads. So
my microphone broke itself again. Instead, I decided to clap the Skype call instead of unmuting myself when I pressed the space bar. Yeah, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for here on the F1 Talk Show. But I'll give you one last question each. I'll go to Connor first because Josh, I feel like we've been hogging you, so you can go away now. Connor, well, I'm going to make a little personal bet with you lot.
Oh no!
Right? I'm going to throw myself in as well.
bring it.
We're going to pick a number of wins that Lewis Hamilton will reach by the end of his career. Whoever gets closest gets a $5. Pick a number.
I mean, wow, that's a long-term 3-year, 5-year bet, isn't it? Jesus.
Exactly.
Okay. Right. Okay. Let's have a look then. Right. So, how many wins he had this season? He's had 5 wins this season. They'll probably get another 2, maybe 3, maybe. So if we say he has another 2 runs at a championship, that's going to take him 120. Yeah, I'll say 120.
I'm going to say after this, he's got 1 more season left before he calls it a day. I'm going to say he wins 2 more races this season. And only 2. I know it sounds weird, but as we've discussed, all seems like most broken, unfortunately. But the engine issue is going to happen. The engine penalty that's going to happen. And then next year, I would say he might win 7 or 8 races. So I'm going to say probably you're looking at 110.
All right. Well, I'll go for the low ball then. Again, I also think that next season will probably be. I think next season will actually be Lewis's last season. I'll have my reasons on that. I think Mercedes might tell him to jog on once they realise Russell's quite quick and is a lot cheaper. And it depends on Mercedes.
Good old cost cap.
Yeah. Well, there's that, but you know, stuff. And if Mercedes aren't the championship challenger next season, they probably will be because they've got a budget of $1 billion. But I'm going to throw it in that he only wins 1 more race this season. And then I think he'll win 3 next year. But I don't think he'll have a run at the championship. So I think, and that's because I don't think Mercedes will be quite good enough next year. So I'm going to go with a nice 104. Bear in mind, it's the closest as well. So even if it's not bang on, if you're closest, then you get a $5 from me.
So you're basically saying then, Ross, that in theory, Hamilton won't win this season in the driver championship this season because he didn't even win. So Verstappen will win the championship this season, and he won't win next season either.
No, well, next year, I don't think that the Mercedes will be good enough next year. I don't think. What I'm hoping is that someone comes along with a better package just to shake it up a bit, to be brutally honest.
I bet Haas will. I bet Haas will just do a brawn and just dominate everything.
We can dream.
I, as much as it would be highly amusing, I don't think Mick Schumacher will be winning his first world title next year.
With Haas. Gunther Steiner winning the World Championship. That'll be an interesting day when keep tabs when Lewis Hamilton retires. 104, did you say 110 and 120, was it, Connor?
Can I change it to 115 after all of that?
All right, 115. So
no, you're not allowed to change it.
Right.
It's
one of those stats.
On the line.
When Lewis Hamilton retires, I will come back and I'll watch this. 104. Then Josh is that way on the camera. He's what?
110.
What, 110?
110.
And then 115 for Connor, who's like there-ish, I think. Whoever's closest gets a fiver. So, for example, if it's 108, then Josh gets it. If it's 117, then Connor gets it.
What if it's halfway between two of them?
Flip a coin. And then if it's me, I'll just go buy myself some chips or something.
Not just split it £2.50 each.
That makes actually, yeah, we'll do that. Then you can go and buy yourself 5/6 of a Tesco meal deal. How does that sound? Well, thank you for joining us here on the F1 Talk Show on Motorsport Radio. And next week, same time, same place, we'll be running you through our preview of our return to Turkey. So see you then. Goodbye.
Anything less than you.